Mr. Nelson, I want to apologize.
Okay. From now on, we'll work together.
Did you know the house in this movie would later become the home of television's most famous monster family? Or that Lou Costello once secretly boxed before becoming one of Hollywood's greatest comedians? Add in invisible continuity tricks, real-world IRS drama, and one visual goof you'll never unsee, and you've got one of the strangest entries in Universal's monster canon. Today, we're breaking down 20 weird facts about Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man, a film that quietly connects classic horror, classic comedy, and TV history in ways most fans completely miss.
It's the police. Come on, let's sneak out the back way and they can't catch us. Good. Come on, let's go. Hey, wait a minute. We're detectives.
Fact 1. The future Munster Mansion. The house featured prominently in Abbott and Costello. Meet the Invisible Man might look like just another ordinary Universal backlot home, but it would later become one of the most recognizable houses in television history. Years after this film wrapped, the same physical structure was heavily redressed and transformed into 1313 Mockingbird Lane, the iconic Munster Mansion. While the addresses themselves were fictional, the bones of the house remained the same, linking this light-hearted comedy to one of the most famous monster families ever created. It's a perfect example of how Universal reused its backlot like a living archive, quietly repurposing familiar spaces and allowing one unassuming set to evolve from a crime comedy backdrop into a gothic TV landmark that generations of viewers would instantly recognize. Fact 2. Claude Rains still plays the Invisible Man. Even though Claude Rains never physically appears in the film, his presence is felt in a surprisingly direct way. The photograph of Dr. Jack Griffin, the original inventor of the invisibility serum, is actually an image of Rains himself, taken from Universal's 1933 The Invisible Man. This wasn't accidental or lazy reuse, it was a deliberate visual nod meant to anchor the comedy within Universal's classic horror lineage. By using Rains' image, the film quietly acknowledges the character's cinematic origins, creating a bridge between the studio's serious horror past and its increasingly comedic monster future. It's subtle, easy to miss, and deeply satisfying once you notice it. Fact 3. Lou Costello really was a boxer. The boxing jokes sprinkled throughout the film aren't just random gags, they're rooted in Lou Costello's real life. Long before he became a comedy icon, Costello briefly boxed as a teenager in New Jersey. It didn't last long. Once his mother found out what he was doing, she immediately shut it down, ending his boxing career before it truly began. That personal history quietly informs some of the film's funniest moments, turning what looks like pure slapstick into a sly inside joke. It's one of those rare cases where Costello isn't just playing a role, he's riffing on a life path he very narrowly avoided. Fact 4. The footprint goof you can't unsee. To stay invisible, Tommy Nelson must be completely naked, a rule the film takes surprisingly seriously, except, of course, when it doesn't. In one of the movie's most obvious visual errors, Tommy walks across a boxing gym mat and leaves behind footprints that clearly look like he's wearing shoes. Not bare feet, shoes. It's a blink-and-you-miss-it mistake that slipped through during fast-paced production, but once you spot it, it becomes impossible to ignore. It's the kind of classic practical effects slip that reminds you just how tricky invisibility was to pull off long before digital fixes existed. Fact 5. Meta-movie name-dropping. In one quick exchange, the film sneaks in a joke that breaks the fourth wall just enough to reward sharp-eared viewers. When a reporter asks Lou who he's fought before, he casually rattles off names, including Charles Lamont, the actual director of the movie. It's a fun moment that perfectly reflects Abbott and Costello's comedic style, where reality and performance constantly overlap. These kinds of meta-jokes weren't meant to stop the film dead for applause. They were subtle winks, slipped in for anyone paying close attention, and they add an extra layer of charm to the insanity. Fact 6. Real names hidden in plain sight. Like many Abbott and Costello films, this one quietly blurs the line between fiction and reality. Bud Abbott's character is named Bud Alexander, a direct reference to Abbott's real middle name. Meanwhile, Lou Costello's character name, Lou Francis, pulls from Costello's birth name, Louis Francis Cristillo. These weren't flashy Easter eggs meant to be announced. They were subtle personal touches slipped into the script, likely amusing the performers far more than the audience at the time. For modern viewers, though, they act as tiny fingerprints left behind by the stars themselves, reinforcing how closely Abbott and Costello's screen personas were tied to who they really were. Fact 7. From serious horror to comedy gold. By the late 1940s, Universal's monster strategy had shifted dramatically. After the unexpected smash success of Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, the studio realized audiences weren't just willing to laugh at the monsters, they wanted to. Instead of continuing strictly serious Invisible Man sequels, Universal leaned into comedy, reshaping this project into something lighter, faster, and more gag-driven. The result was a film that still borrowed the bones of classic horror storytelling, but dressed it in slapstick, wordplay, and chaos. It marked a turning point where Universal's monsters stopped being purely terrifying and started becoming pop culture icons who could survive in almost any genre. Fact 8. The man who made invisibility possible. Behind all of the floating objects, moving props, and disappearing acts was John P. Fulton, Universal's legendary special effects artist. Fulton had already mastered invisibility effects years earlier on films like The Invisible Man, Invisible Agent, and The Invisible Woman. By the time this movie was made, his techniques were so refined that Universal could execute complex illusions quickly and reliably, without digital tools, green screens, or post-production fixes. Every gag depended on precision camera work, carefully timed performances, and painstaking optical effects, making Fulton's contributions invisible in the best possible way. Fact 9. Shot in just over a month. Efficiency was everything during the studio era, and Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man was no exception. The entire film was shot between October 3rd and November 6th, 1950, a remarkably tight schedule even by Universal standards. This pace was possible because the studio relied on familiar backlot sets, experienced crews, and performers who could deliver their routines quickly. There was little room for experimentation or reshoots. Scenes had to work almost immediately, which helps explain both the film's energetic rhythm and the occasional continuity slip that made it into the final cut. Fact 10. A modest hit for Universal. While it wasn't a record-breaking blockbuster, the film performed well enough to justify Universal's continued investment in Abbott and Costello's monster mashups. Produced on a relatively modest budget, it earned comfortably beyond its production costs, reinforcing the studio's belief that comedy was the safest way to keep its classic monsters relevant. Financially, it proved that audiences were still eager for these characters, just not necessarily in straight horror form. That success helped cement Abbott and Costello as the bridge between Universal's gothic past and its more playful future. Fact 11. William Frawley before I Love Lucy. When modern audiences spot William Frawley in this film, it can feel strangely disorienting. Years before he became permanently associated with Fred Mertz on I Love Lucy, Frawley was still a reliable studio character actor, drifting between crime films, comedies, and supporting roles like Detective Roberts here. I Love Lucy would debut later in 1951 and completely redefine his career, turning him into a television icon almost overnight. This movie captures Frawley in that brief transitional moment, still very much a film actor, just months away from becoming one of the most recognizable faces in sitcom history. Fact 12. A benefit premiere during the Korean War. When Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man premiered in Los Angeles in April 1951, Hollywood was already responding to the realities of the Korean War. According to contemporary reports, proceeds from the premiere were directed toward a fund benefiting wounded veterans. It's an easy detail to overlook, but it reflects how closely studio publicity, patriotism, and real-world events were intertwined during this era. Even a lighthearted comedy about invisibility existed within a culture shaped by conflict, recovery, and national responsibility. Fact 13. IRS trouble behind the laughter. Behind the cheerful chaos on screen, Abbott and Costello were facing serious financial problems. Years of mismanagement, bad contracts, and mounting tax debt had left both men in deep trouble with the IRS industry lore. Claims that when filming wrapped, they held a party where their earnings were humorously presented as a payment toward what they owed. Whether embellished or not, the story reflects a harsher truth. At the height of their fame, the duo was under intense financial pressure, performing comedy while privately struggling to stay afloat. Fact 14. Costello's famous malapropism. Director Charles Lamont reportedly pushed for more rehearsal during production, a suggestion that didn't sit well with Lou Costello. According to long-repeated studio legend, Costello fired back that rehearsing too much would ruin the spontaneity. The word, of course, doesn't exist, but that's exactly what makes the story endure. Whether the line happened exactly as remembered or grew sharper with retelling, it perfectly captures Costello's comic instinct, trusting rhythm, timing, and instinct over polish, even when the cameras were rolling. Fact 15. Borrowing from the Invisible Man returns. At its core, the film borrows the basic framework from The Invisible Man Returns, an innocent man falsely accused of murder who uses invisibility to clear his name. But where the earlier film leaned into suspense and desperation, this version strips the story down to its simplest parts and rebuilds it around Abbott and Costello's routines. The plot exists largely to keep the gags moving, transforming a tense premise into a playground for physical comedy, misunderstandings, and perfectly timed interruptions. It's less a remake than a playful remix. Fact 16. A nod to the original Invisible Man. Although Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man isn't a strict sequel, it makes a clear effort to honor Universal's original 1933 classic. References to Dr. Griffin and the original invisibility serum serve as quiet acknowledgments of where the character began, grounding the comedy in real franchise history. Rather than parodying the original outright, the film treats it with a surprising amount of respect, allowing the horror roots to remain intact beneath the jokes. It's less about continuity and more about lineage, a playful reminder that even slapstick chaos can coexist with cinematic legacy. Fact 17. The movie that's often misdated. Despite being firmly a 1951 release, Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man is frequently mislabeled as a 1952 film. That confusion likely stems from its long life on television, where reruns throughout the early 1950s blurred its original release date. Over time, the mistake found its way into listings, reference books, and casual film histories. In reality, the movie premiered on March 7, 1951, placing it squarely in the early post-war studio era, right as Hollywood comedy was beginning to migrate toward television. Fact 18. A title that breaks grammar rules. Even the film's title has a strange quirk hiding in plain sight. On screen, it reads, Bud Abbott, Lou Costello, Meet the Invisible Man, omitting the word "and" entirely, and using both performers' full names. It's an unusual stylistic choice that feels oddly formal for such a chaotic comedy. Whether it was a branding decision or a studio preference, the title itself stands out as one more reminder that Universal never did things quite the standard way with Abbott and Costello. Fact 19. The shadow that shouldn't exist. In a film built entirely around the idea that a man can vanish completely, even the smallest visual slip becomes fascinating. In at least one shot, careful viewers have noticed something that technically shouldn't be there at all. A faint shadow cast on the floor by Tommy Nelson's supposedly invisible body. It's subtle, easy to miss, and almost certainly the result of rushed lighting during a fast-paced production schedule. But once you see it, it raises all kinds of questions about how invisibility was staged in the era before digital effects. Shadows, reflections, and lighting were constant enemies of practical illusions, and this moment offers a rare glimpse behind the curtain, where the magic almost but not quite holds together. Fact 20. The door that opens itself too early. One of the most charming gags in the film also hides one of its most revealing Easter eggs. During a hallway scene, a door begins to swing open just a fraction of a second before the invisible character appears to reach it. The timing is barely off, but it's enough to expose the illusion if you're watching closely. What you're really seeing is a crew member pulling the door from off camera, jumping the cue by an instant. It's a tiny mistake, but it perfectly illustrates how these effects worked in real time, relying on human coordination rather than digital precision. And once you notice it, it becomes one of those moments that makes viewers rewind, freeze frame, and proudly point it out in the comments.
Oh, Bud, I want to tell you something, Bud. Here's Bud over here. Hiya, Bud. Hiya, Bud. Come here.
And there you have it. 20 weird facts about Abbott and Costello meet the Invisible Man. From invisible continuity mistakes and subtle Easter eggs to real-life boxing pasts and behind-the-scenes financial stress, this movie hides far more history than most fans ever realize. If one of these facts surprised you, let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy deep dives into classic films and forgotten Hollywood stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stick around for more.